A signature ability not only gives a Pokemon an unmistakable identity, but it can also be a characteristic that makes a Pokemon broken or bad. So good morning everybody, good morning, it's JPR, and today we're taking a look at the worst signature abilities in Pokemon. So for a quick disclaimer, we are only discussing abilities that are still signature abilities in Generation 9. So something like Regigigas' Slow Start that used to be a signature ability but isn't anymore won't be counted. Wait, you didn't know that? Oh yeah, Varoom has it as a hidden ability now, because, get it? He's an engine. Haha, that's so funny. I'm also not going to discuss abilities that have temporarily become signature abilities like Torkoal's White Smoke, because all other uses of those abilities have been excluded from Gen 9 so far, because we already know that more than one Pokemon can have these abilities, and I think it's kinda dumb that Bulbapedia even lists them as signature abilities. They're just making me have to do more scrolling while I do research. There are currently only 2 abilities originating in Generation 3 that have remained signature abilities for their entire histories, and those abilities belong to 2 of Hoenn's most gimmicky normal types, Castform and Kecleon. Although, rather humorously, both of them are absent in Scarlet and Violet, so their abilities actually haven't been seen since Sword and Shield. Now, Castform, despite being an underwhelming Pokemon, gets a pass with Forecast, because it can at least be used to make Castform into a decent fighter. As for Kecleon, yeah, there's no saving this guy. Color Change is just Protean, but if you let the opponent choose what type you turn into. In theory, this ability is supposed to be used for defensive purposes, as most types like water, grass, fire, electric, dark, and more all resist themselves. So the opponent can't hit you twice in a row for big damage. Except they can, and much easier actually. They can just hit Kecleon with a grass or bug type move on the first turn to add way more weaknesses to it, and then use a super effective move on the second turn. And wouldn't you know it, starting in Gen 6, they gave Kecleon Protean as a hidden ability. You know, only one of the best abilities in recent Pokemon history. So now Color Change is truly pointless, as any Kecleon player with a brain, my, that was quite the oxymoron, wasn't it, is just going to use Protean instead. And oh hey, speaking of underwhelming normal types from Hoenn, we have another one of the longest lasting signature abilities in Pokemon history. That being the signature ability of Skitty and Delcatty since Gen 4, we have Normalize. Normalize does exactly what it sounds like, turns all moves into normal type attacks. Because coverage? Who needs that? With Normalize, you can have a normal type Thunder Wave to paralyze ground type Pokemon. And, I think that's about it. That's pretty much the only useful thing I can think of off the top of my head. Most people would say that Normalize's main purpose for existing is to make Delcatty's stab moves even stronger. Yippee, a whole 20% bonus on a Pokemon with 65 base attack. If they wanted Delcatty to do damage, there had to have been a better way. Plus, Normalize didn't even grant the extra 20% damage buff until Gen 7. So for the first 10 years of its existence, it was truly the definition of useless. And when put next to the abilities of Refrigerate, Pixelate, Aerolate, and Galvanize, which are all extremely useful, Normalize just looks even worse in comparison. A bad ability for a bad Pokemon. It's a match made in purgatory. Well, thanks to Varoom bailing Regigigas out, we don't have any bad signature abilities left from Gen 4, so moving on to Gen 5, the easiest pick is most certainly Defeatist, which cuts your Pokemon's attack in half when Arcan or Archeops reaches half HP. Okay, so maybe in Gen 5 you could say this one halfway made sense. I mean, Pokemon with stats as good as Archeops were quite the rarity back in the day, but starting in Gen 6, stats like this, or even better, are just the norm now. So it makes you wonder, what was even the point? Archeops is far from being the most overpowered Pokemon, even without this ability. Why did Game Freak feel the need to give it such a hindering ability? My guess is that it's a purely main story ability, as Archeops would be able to tear through the main playthrough way too easily with its crazy strong stats. So they tacked on this lazily designed ability after the fact to make you take countless trips to the Pokemon Center during your journey across Unova. But even in that case, why not just make Archeops have a middle-of-the-road, not great but not horrible hidden ability that could at least serve some competitive usage once the main story is over? Maybe one day Archeops will get the hidden ability it deserves, but after 5 straight gens being changed into Defeatist, I'm not gonna start holding my breath. Well, we got the obvious one off the table, but what about one that's a little less talked about? Because my next pick is Zorua and Zoroark's Illusion. On paper, this ability was a great idea, until Game Freak introduced Team Preview the exact same generation, effectively stealing away any surprise factor Zoroark was supposed to have. Now, Zoroark can still use Illusion to great effect at times to create an opening, but usually this is only for a single turn before your opponent quickly catches on to the sham, and then the rest of the battle plays out as if Zoroark doesn't have an ability at all. It also doesn't help that Zoroark doesn't have the greatest defensive typing with Dark, so if you're hoping to use it to avoid taking big damage, then I've got bad news for you. Hisuian Zoroark can use his ability slightly better with its normal ghost typing, but neither form of this Pokemon provides a ton of resistances. Is Illusion nearly as bad as the 3 previous abilities I mentioned? No, not even close. But it's just not nearly as useful as most people would imagine it being. But if you do want something useful, you should subscribe to this channel for more great Pokemon content every Friday. It's free, so don't miss out. In Generation 6, the first ability we have to discuss is Grass Pelt. If you've never heard of this ability, that's because it's pretty obscure. And bad, which is why it's in this video. Being the hidden ability of Skidoo and Gogoat. Grass Pelt increases the Pokemon's physical defense by 50% when grassy terrain is activated. The problem is, grassy terrain isn't commonly used as a move, and generally only gets set up if you happen to have a Rillaboom or Tapu Bulu with Grassy Surge on your team. And to put it lightly, Rillaboom is nowhere near the same tier of usage as Gogoat, regardless of the format you're playing in. So with these two virtually never being on the same team, there's pretty much no reason to ever run Grass Pelt over Gogoat's other ability, Sap Sipper, which is generally seen as better since it's a free immunity even if Gogoat already resists grass moves. The attack boost is very appreciated as well. Gen 6 does have another ability that makes this list though, and it actually belongs to one of Kalos's 3 legendary Pokemon, that being Zygarde's Aura Break. Aura Break is an ability that reverses the power of Xerneas' Fairy Aura and Yveltal's Dark Aura. This alone makes Aura Break an extremely niche ability that is almost never going to be used over the infinitely better Power Construct, which unlocks Zygarde's 100% form. But what's even odder is the way the math works behind this ability. See, Fairy Aura and Dark Power increase Fairy and Dark type move powers by 33%. So logically, you would think that Aura Break lowers them by 33%. Well, not exactly. Because Xerneas and Yveltal's power buff is actually calculated as a multiplier of 4/3 instead of 1.33. So when they say Aura Break reverses this effect, they actually mean the fraction gets flipped over. So Fairy and Dark moves do 3/4 of the damage instead of 4/3. So they actually only get reduced by 25%, which isn't a lot at all. To put it simply, the math ain't mathin'. It just kind of feels like a bad scam, honestly. The next ability is what my comment section likes to do a lot of the time, Long Reach. As the signature ability of the Decidueye line, this one sticks out as oddly disappointing. Considering most of the time whenever a starter Pokemon gets a signature ability, it's usually something completely broken. As for Long Reach, it just makes it so none of Decidueye's moves actually make contact with the opponent. So stuff like Static or Flame Body doesn't work on Decidueye. It's basically the item protective pads in an ability form. Again, it's far from the worst ability in this video, it's just oddly niche and not very useful compared to what most starters get. Hisuian Decidueye also had this ability internally in Generation 8 before Game Freak said, actually, that sucks. We're changing it to Scrappy in Scarlet and Violet, and thus Hisuian Decidueye saw 0.01% more usage in the latter than it had in years past. Hoorah! The only other one from Gen 7, honestly, is just a weird case that I thought I would mention. It's actually a great ability, it just kinda sucks as a signature ability for these Pokemon. And that ability is Merciless for Mareanie and Toxapex. This ability makes all moves critical hits when the target is poisoned, which sounds amazing for a Pokemon that primarily poisons things with attacks like Toxic Spikes and Baneful Bunker. The problem is, their other ability is Regenerator, and given how their stats are, that ability just fits these Pokemon's niche way better. Merciless would probably be incredible on any remotely offensive poison-type Pokemon like Nidoking or Salazzle, but coming from Mr. Base 53 special attack over here, it's pretty useless. Moving into Gen 8, this is where almost every single new Pokemon has some sort of signature ability, and for the most part, they're all really good. I mean, sure, there's Yomper's Ball Fetch, although that one is kind of a meme and even gets replaced as soon as it evolves into Boltund, so I hesitate to even count that one. And it also makes me go, good doggy, when he does it, which is a vital part of the Pokemon experience if you ask me. So the actual worst ability of Gen 8 if you ask me is Ice-Cue's Ice Face. Similar to Kecleon who started this list off, this is more of a gimmick that just doesn't work well. It's pretty much a worse executed version of Minior Shields Down, who is already not an amazing Pokemon. I don't say that from a place of hate, I love Minior actually, I just wish it was better. Ice-Cue on the other hand is a terrible, pure Ice-type Pokemon that is forced to set up with Belly Drum in the most predictable fashion possible when it has Ice Face, because that's all this Pokemon really can do. The idea behind this ability isn't that bad on paper, as the ice blocks any damage from physical attacks and can be restored in hail or snow, but when you realize that a special attack KOs this Pokemon rather easily, it leaves this ability to be rather useless and do nothing but unnecessarily slow Ice-Cue down. Ice-Q also faces other problems like its generally poor stats and absolutely horrific physical move pool that stop it from doing anything useful, but the gimmick tied to the ability is the main culprit behind this pitiful, pathetic penguin. Gen 9 likewise is made up of mostly new signature abilities, and like in Galar, the majority of them are quite useful. Even the worst ones still manage to be somewhat useful in most situations. Although, if there's one I would argue doesn't accomplish this, it's Toadscruel's Mycelium Might. This ability makes Toadscruel always move last when it uses status moves like Spore or Leech Seed. But those status moves will always hit regardless of the target's ability. While this does help against Pokemon with really good abilities like Golden Go and Garganacl, who are normally able to avoid statuses, generally speaking, this ability does nothing for you in most battles except make Toadscruel more annoying to use. I'm fairly certain that the only reason this ability exists is that they didn't want a base 100 speed Pokemon with Spore to exist, which they could have much more easily prevented by just giving Toadscruel a more appropriate lower speed stat, but for some reason the regional fakes had to be exactly the same as the original Kanto Pokemon in every way except typing and name. Can you tell I'm not a big fan of this concept? But yeah, anyway, this ability is pretty much Walmart brand mold breaker. I would say don't use it, but it's literally the only thing Toadscruel gets right now, which is even more depressing. And lastly, to close things out, from the DLC, we have Dipplin and Hydrapple's Super Sweet Syrup, an ability that lowers the evasiveness of all foe Pokemon in the field whenever these Pokemon are sent into battle for the first time. Ignoring the fact that this ability only activates once per battle for some reason, this ability only really has utility in VGC where it can affect 2 opponents at once, and even then, it's not the biggest deal in the world because Protect is ran on virtually everything, and you can just switch out to get rid of the debuff. Also, according to Pikalytics, 87% of Hydrapple users in VGC just use Regenerator instead, which doesn't surprise me. So congrats to Regenerator, you killed not 1 but 2 signature abilities in this video, except unlike Merciless, Super Sweet Syrup would be kinda bad in almost all contexts. So it's nice that Hydrapple at least has a backup option. And so, those are some of the worst signature abilities in Pokemon history. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you guys next time.